Now, junior doctors is a subject that we haven't talked about for some time on the programme. Their dispute is still ongoing. There was, of course, strike action the week before last in the run-up to the general election. They still have a 35% pay demand on the table. And today they met with the new Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. And I think this is going to be a key test of Wes Streeting, actually, to see what deal he can come to. He says he's optimistic that a deal can be met. The junior doctors, they said their meeting today with him was positive, but there's still no agreement. I guess this was one of the kind of meeting where you just sort of sound out the other side to see what you think that they might accept. Now, I've always thought there is a solution available to this. And I don't expect Wes Streeting to give way and say, yeah, well, of course you can have 35% right now. There's no way that he's going to do that. And the BMA know that too, I would have thought. So surely the solution to this is to come up with a 5-year plan where there will be pay restoration within 5 years, maybe even 3 years. And so, right, we're going to offer you initially, 12%, 15%, something like that. And then next year we're going to offer X, and then the following year will be Y. And by that time, you will have caught up. But you cannot expect the 35% all in one go. Now, the BMA said, well, we never said 35% in one go. Well, they did at the beginning. They seem to have changed their position on that a little over time. They get very cross with me when I say that. But my recollection is right at the beginning. That is exactly what they were asking for, all in one go. So my question to you is this: how tough do you think Wes Streeting should be, or how generous do you think he should be? Because I think we can all agree that we want this dispute ended as soon as possible. Well, Aki Chambray, LBC's political correspondent, joins me. Now, Wes Streeting is a politician who always talks a good game, but now he's in power, he's got to deliver, hasn't he?
He does. And I mean, he is saying he's still talking a good game. He's still saying he's optimistic. He came out of those talks and said it had gone well, said it was constructive, but he also said it's not going to be easy. But it's a very different job being a very good media performer in opposition to being the Secretary of State and having to look after a very tricky department, especially when they are saying, the government is saying, you know, we've inherited the worst economy since the Second World War. So no, it's not going to be easy.
So how do you think this will progress now? Because they're meeting again next week. The junior doctors, they've got no further strike action planned. But of course, that might change depending on what Wes Streeting has to offer.
Yeah, I mean, they've been pretty clear that this will take a while. I think both sides have been clear. The BMA suggested it could be done in a week. Labour poo-pooed that and said it will take a number of weeks. And yes, as you say, they're meeting next week. It's interesting, in the beginning you were talking about maybe saying, OK, well, maybe 12% and then more and then more. In opposition, actually, Wes Streeting did say that getting to pay restoration was a journey, not an event. So that is something that they could potentially offer. But I think it will be a lot of meetings. Today was a face-to-face sort of vibes, getting to know each other meeting, and then from there the actual negotiations will start. And you could imagine that might be slightly more difficult than the getting to know each other meeting. But Labour does point to the deals that the BMA accepted in England and Wales, and that was about 12%.
A couple of texts before we go to a break. Lisa says, also, please check what the average take-home pay is for these junior doctors, as it's a given that they work overtime. I think you're right that most doctors do work overtime, but I'm not sure that has any particular relevance to their pay claim, does it? Give me a call and tell me why you think it does. Niall says, let's just split the difference. 17% now, backdated by a year, and 5% next year, and RPI and 5% the following year. Well, we can all come up with these kind of solutions, but the fact is that these kind of solutions have been around for a very long time. And as I say, my information is that kind of offer, maybe not 17% initially, but that kind of offer was put to the junior doctors within the last 6 months, and they just weren't willing to talk about it. I'm very keen to hear from junior doctors themselves in this hour, because I'm sure you want to get this dispute settled as much as anyone else. What do you think ought to happen in these talks? What would you personally settle for?
I think Wes Streeting has done exactly the right thing, meeting so quickly with the BMA, because I'm not sure, but I don't think the last Secretary of State ever did. You know, I know they met with people in her ministry, but I don't think she ever sat down with them. And just on the amount, I think it's right that we should look at a staged increase over 2, 3, 4 years. But one particular point that I don't think anybody ever comments on is the fact that when somebody gets an increase in salary, they also pay more tax and more national insurance. So, some of it does go back to the Exchequer. But I think it's long overdue. We need to get the doctors properly paid and other health service staff. And I believe that this year's pay award hasn't yet been announced. I think it's due this summer. Could be wrong.
The problem is that any extra pay has got to be financed from somewhere, and the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has been very clear that she's not coming up with any more money. So if Wes Streeting decides to give a reasonable pay deal or offer a reasonable pay deal, now that some of it will have been factored in already into the NHS budgets, but if he wants to offer more just to get it done, it's got to come from somewhere else in the health service, hasn't it? That's the problem.
Well, not necessarily in the health service, but we can't continue the way it is. These strikes have been going on for too long, and if they are to meet one of their other targets, which is reducing the waiting list, they have to do something. And I don't believe it's going to be anywhere near 35%, but it needs to be reasonable.
Well, the BMA have been very, very categoric that they will not settle for less than 35% over time. Now, that is the flexibility here as to how long that time should be. I would suggest something between 3 and 5 years would be a reasonable time length. But they may say, no, we need to have this in 2 years. What do you think?
They're a trade union, Ian, and it's their negotiating stance. They will come down, and they'll come down significantly. But there's no doubt that this needs to be resolved.
Well, the problem with that is they've shown no sign of coming down significantly ever since these talks have been going on, have they?
Well, no, but is that because they've been hit with a brick wall? I don't know. You said earlier you think there have been some concessions from the Conservative government, but we haven't heard it. So I just think give him a chance, give both of them a chance to see if they can come to a reasonable arrangement. Because the country can't carry on with the NHS as it is.
No, because, look, every time there is a strike, it actually adds to the number of appointments that are cancelled, and therefore the waiting list doesn't go down as much as it should. In fact, it probably goes up. And I'm not saying that the entire waiting list is because of junior doctor strikes, but a percentage of it inevitably has to be. I mean, it's just logical. I don't think anyone can really deny that. So I hope this dispute is settled as soon as possible. But unless Wes Streeting is willing to come up with more money, I'm not sure that the junior doctors are going to give. They're not going to just give in because they've now got a Labour government. I mean, that would be utterly ridiculous, wouldn't it? But I think some people think that that's what they were waiting for.
I think, and I don't know obviously any more than you do, that something has already been put aside, if you like, in the back pockets so that he can come up with some sort of agreement. Because, it has to happen. The Labour Party, are the NHS, aren't they? Or the NHS is part of the Labour Party. They designed it. So they're not going to lose on this, I'm sure. But I don't think it'll be anywhere near.
I just wanted to highlight something that probably the general public are not so aware of. When all the talk about junior doctors starting on a low salary or perceived low, 32,000, the clarification, any doctor who's lower than a consultant level in any hospital, any clinical setting is called a junior doctor. So when the doctors have come out of their uni, they've had 3 years perceived as most junior, starting on the low salary, then most of them go into specialist training. It's called specialist training year 1 to 9. That leads to a consultant level. People who are on specialist training level 3, so they're 5 or 6 years after qualifying, are granting salaries of 85, 90, 95,000 pounds, and they are classed as a junior doctor. And then the public think junior doctors is just someone who's just qualified, paid a low salary. But imagine if the country has to pay every single doctor less than a consultant level 5, 10, 15%, and people on 90 grand, 85 grand are given 15%. I think there's a lack of understanding of what the term junior doctor is, what's being bandied around.
I think you're right. Do you remember a few months ago, the Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, got into a spot of bother when she used the phrase doctors in training rather than junior doctors. And she justified it by saying, well, that is actually the phrase that is used in the health service. She said, I don't like the phrase junior doctor because it implies that every doctor is junior. And I think she had a point on that. Somebody should come up with a proper description. I mean, how can you lump every single... Or just call them doctors, actually. I mean, it ought to be as simple as that, isn't it?
I mean,
isn't that the solution?
If you check any documentation about a junior doctor, it's anyone who's not a consultant. Yeah. And, when people go in to become a doctor, I hope that I'm a nurse, and I hope that every doctor cares, and that's why they go in the profession. If they understand, lots of them understand their options. So if you took specialist training in cardiology, once you're qualified in the private work they're doing, they're warranting £250,000 a year salary and bonuses and extras. So, your potential earnings is huge. And I think that when a nurse comes out on 27 or 28,000 after doing a degree and doing 3 years qualification, and a doctor is getting 32 or 33, you say, well, that's 5 years, that's 2 years extra, and that's where a nurse may be after 2 or 3 more years. You think, well, actually, that's reasonable. And if they say, well, the starting salary increases a little bit, but the whole banding shouldn't be addressed with 10, 15%, there's no way the country could afford it.
Several people are texting me saying that your figures are wrong. Let me give you an example. Adam in Oldham says, this chap is talking drivel. I'm a speciality trainee and am nowhere near 90 grand. Please stop allowing people to get away with nonsense calls. Interesting.
I'll tell you where this comes from. So when you look at, I've got understanding of where locum positions and positions advertised to work in hospitals in London, and someone in A&E at ST3 level, I've seen the adverts and I've seen the offers coming to agencies to please get us someone. We need someone because we can't recruit. We will pay 85 to 90 grand. This is not dribble.
I mean, is this including overtime or just as a basic salary?
So this would be a salary which would include maybe on-call. You know what your salary is. You'll have to work one in so many weekends, or you'll have to do on-call shifts where if the hospital needs you, or you have to come in, and there'll be a package, but you won't be working over the allowed hours in a week because you've got, you can't work more than 48 hours, for example, in any job without, an agreement. So it's not that they're working 75 hours a week, but they may have to work, different shift patterns.